Okay, let's talk about the Orthohack preprocessor. So the preprocessor is controlled by a couple of different include files. First, I want to look at config.h. This is kind of where it all comes together for the preprocessor and the postprocessor. So the first thing is this path name here. And this basically tells you where the OrthoBasis database is located. In this case, it's the IDCT database. And you'll notice that it ends in a slash, and this backslash belongs to this null character here. And then, of course, we have the output file name of the preprocessor, which is equivalently the input file name of the postprocessor, which is listed here as well. The coefficient count, that's the number of coefficients coming out of the transform, so it's OX40 or 64, which makes sense for an 8x8 transform. And overflow check. Overflow check is something related to fixed point. We'll talk about that later. The precision ratio limit and zero limit, those were covered in the video on numerical error earlier. The sample count is the number of spatial samples going in a DCT, it's the same as the number of coefficients coming out, so that makes sense. Now, if you have a redundant transform, such as a mirror extended transform, the number of coefficients coming out might be some multiple, usually a power of 2, of the samples going in. Conversely, if you have a transform which destroys information, then the number of samples, the number of coefficients going out would probably be some power of 2 less than, or smaller than, the number of samples coming in. All right. Simul-thread index max. This is basically has to do with thread pipelining for multi-threading, and you can tune this up and down and see what happens to performance. It's pretty tunable. All right. The other file is pre.h. This controls the way that the preprocessor behaves in two ways. First of all, population min. Generally speaking, Orthohack's default behavior is to exploit all possible common terms no matter what. So if we find a binomial that has a population of at least 2, then we will try to create a substitution for it. However, this is tweakable. It may be that that's overkill, and that if you set this up to 3 or 4, you may end up getting a different transform that actually performs better. But this is completely experimental. I haven't tested this, so if it blows up in a funny way, let me know. As far as these variables are concerned, so you'll see a lot of this stuff in the various modules in Orthohack. Precision in, internal, and out. So in describes the numerical precision of the OrthoBasis sample files. 1 means 64-bit double precision. Internal describes internal calculations in memory, which is set to 2. That means long double in C, which on x86 means 80-bit precision. That's not a particularly cross-platform concept. And precision out, we go back to double precision when we do the I/O. Now, if I were to make a quote-unquote real transform, I don't mean real numbers, I mean an actual transform I would probably set precision out to 2, simply because I want to maintain maximum precision between the time that I first pick up the OrthoBasis vectors and I issue the final orthohack.h. But that's up to you. Okay? So let's go ahead and run it. Actually, we have to compile it first. So we've just compiled it. It just cannot remove free because it doesn't exist yet. Run the preprocessor. And what the preprocessor just did, if you recall, IDCT 8x8, it just created this thing right here. Okay, and we could diff it with a reference, and I assure you it would be the same. But let's actually have a look at what it does. So this happened in a couple seconds, but as you get to larger and larger transforms, this can be a multi-hour process very quickly, and you'll discover that. It starts with 4,096 terms being non-zero. What does this mean? This means that there are 64 orthobases times 64 sample points, and all of their sample points happen to be non-zero, which is kind of unfortunate because if some of them were 0, we'd get some advantage off the bat, but that doesn't happen. So it starts building the binomial tree. And so it creates 21 substitutions with population 32. And then after that happens, so you have 21 binomials defined because you had none before. And then the zillions of monomials. And these monomials basically are a combination of the original terms that are still floating around that couldn't be simplified, and then also binomials times some scaling factor. And so as you see, as the process continues, you get more and more binomials and fewer monomials, until at the end of the day, down here, you end up with about 450 binomials and 128 monomials. And finally, it finds no substitutions that have at least population 2, and it terminates, and it mentions again the 128 monomials. It writes the orthohack file, and it's done. Okay, that's it for this one. The next video is going to be about the postprocessor.